Hey there, welcome to the channel. So spring is here, Easter's around the corner, so let's make a dessert to go with all of that. Today, we're gonna make a gluten-free carrot cake bread with a maple cream cheese frosting. I'm Jamie with SavorySaver. I share gluten-free recipes, tips, tricks, and resources to make your gluten-free lifestyle easier. So please consider hitting subscribe and let's get started. All right guys, so today's recipe comes from the Gluten Free Austrian. I don't think I've made any of her recipes, but I've always seen good reviews on them. I also need to check out some of her real bread recipes. We may need to dive into those at some point, but today we're gonna do a sweet one. So it does use Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1. So if that is what you have at home, great. She also, in her blog post, has a link to her own flour blend, which she says that works with it as well. So either her blend or the Bob's Red Mill. Other blends, of course, you can try them, but she's not tried them and neither have I. So this is more of a quick bread slash cake, which is nice because we don't need any heavy mixers. We don't even need the hand mixer. We're gonna do it all by hand. I have measured just about everything out and it's ready to go. So hopefully it'll just take a minute or two to put together. And I'm gonna turn my oven on now because it shouldn't be much work. I'm gonna preheat my oven to 350 degrees and let's get mixing. All right, so I've got my bread loaf pan here and she actually suggests a Pullman loaf pan, but she also says you can use a standard one. So I've got a standard loaf pan. I did use shortening on the inside. I don't always like to do that when there's parchment involved too, because I don't think it should matter, but I did. So grease the inside of your pan, line it with parchment with some handles that you can pull that bread out with after, and then press that into the pan. I am gonna take these off, I think, for baking. I just have them on there just to hold the parchment down while I get it in the pan. For the carrots, you want 225 grams of finely grated carrots. That's about 2 cups. I actually used the large holes of my box grater, and then I ran my knife through it because I didn't think they were quite fine enough. So I grated them right into this towel, and then I've been pressing it out a little bit just to take some of that excess moisture out. So it doesn't say that you need to wring it out, but I've just been kind of blotting it, moving it around. And I did this first and then prepped all the other ingredients, so that would give this time to kind of dry out just a little bit. So I'm gonna put this off to the side for just a minute. So let's get our dry ingredients together. I've got a sifter here. She does say to sift it, and if you don't want to, at least get the whisk out and give it a really good whisk. I'll sift it this time. We'll see how that does. It may make a difference. It's gonna lighten all that flour up. It's gonna separate everything, so it's not a bad thing. So this is 300 grams of the Bob's Red Mill. Everything else that's a dry ingredient, she has the grams amount, but she also has the volume. So I'm actually gonna do it by volume, just because it's a little quicker for camera, and hopefully it won't make a difference with what we're doing. So I've got 1 teaspoon of baking powder, a half teaspoon of baking soda. Her recipe calls for 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt. My kosher salt is really big crystals, so I'm gonna use table salt, so 3/4 of a teaspoon. You want 1.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, a half teaspoon of ground ginger, and there's a couple lumps in there, so that will get taken care of in the sifter. 1/8 teaspoon ground nutmeg. And this ingredient's a little bit unusual. We're gonna use a little bit of ground black pepper, freshly ground. She calls for 1/8 teaspoon of this as well. I think I'm just gonna do 3 or 4 cranks. Let's do 5. This should not make it spicy or peppery. It should just give it a little bit of something in the background, I would think. I'm gonna sift it into the bowl. That looks good. I am gonna whisk it just a little bit just because of those spices. There we go, that kind of blended the color a little bit. Let's put this to the side for just a minute. So for our wet ingredients, our sugars, of course, are part of our wet ingredients because they're going to dissolve into those liquids. So I've got 150 grams of light brown sugar, 50 grams of, there's the oven, 50 grams of white sugar, 100 grams of unsweetened natural apple sauce, It's about a cup. There was very little left in here after I measured out the weight. So you might be able to like use the whole cup. If not, just take a small spoonful out and have a snack. We're also going to add 2 large eggs at room temperature and 80 grams of a neutral oil like vegetable or canola. The applesauce and the oil, you know, they're working together. She does not suggest swapping out all the oil for the applesauce, so take that into account if you like to swap stuff out once in a while. All right, let's mix all of this until it's smooth. All right, guys, that looks good to me. So now we're gonna slowly incorporate the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients. And you wanna do it just until everything's combined. So let's try it in thirds. All right, I'm just gonna mix it until I really can't see any streaks of flour. Okay, I think we're good. Now I'm gonna fold in the carrots. So let's fold them in. This is a nice thick dough, or batter, I guess. Make sure you're getting up any more flour that you see in there and get that mixed in there. All right, guys, I think we're good. Let's get it in the pan. Get it all smoothed out. So now let's get it baked off. You are gonna bake this for 55 to 65 minutes until the top is golden brown and a toothpick that comes out of the center should be dry. With this quick bread, she actually gives us a temperature. So it's 200 degrees Fahrenheit, 93 degrees Celsius. I am gonna bake till temperature because temperature is a little more accurate than that toothpick going in there. You don't have a thermometer and want to do it that way, don't worry about it. Just temperature is more accurate. So if you have one, go ahead and use it. So we're gonna get this baked off. And then once it's baked off, I'm gonna let it cool for 10 to 15 minutes in the pan, then remove it, let it cool completely, and we'll get it iced. So while this bakes and cools, I'll show you how to make the icing. Let's get that maple cream cheese frosting made. So to a medium-sized bowl, I have 115 grams of room temperature cream cheese. I also have 30 grams of room temperature butter. The recipe calls for unsalted. I'm using salted, and I'm not gonna add the additional salt that she calls for in the recipe. It should not make this frosting salty, so I'm just gonna negate the salt that she's adding and leave it as is. I'm also gonna add 35 grams of maple syrup and a half teaspoon of vanilla. Now I wanna blend this until it's nice and smooth. Okay, so it's not quite where I want it yet. It is pretty smooth, but there's these little bitty clumps in here. I think that's the butter. The butter in the house is at room temperature, but it's about 66 or so in here. So it's not quite as soft as the cream cheese is for some reason, even though the cream cheese has been out and is plenty room temp. So I'm just gonna mix it a little bit longer just to try to get some of those lumps out. All right, guys, that looks a lot better to me. There's still a little bit in there, but not hardly anything at all. So let's add our powdered sugar. So I've got 50 grams of powdered sugar, and I am gonna sift it into the bowl a little at a time. Sifting it will break up any lumps, and it's gonna give us a smoother and more consistent frosting. So just do a little bit at a time into the bowl, maybe, I don't know, half at a time or maybe a third at a time. Blend it in and then add the next batch because we want it to be really smooth. So let's start with that. All right, this is where all the lumps are, so let's get the rest of that in there. See all those lumps? We'll just take care of that now. Now we're gonna mix it up until it's all nice and smooth. All right, guys, nice and smooth. Room temperature, super important for this. So let's put that to the side until it's ready to ice. Here's what we look like out of the oven. It did take the full 65 minutes. I checked it an hour in and it was a little wet on the end of the thermometer, even though it was reading 200 degrees. So I did the next 5 and now it looks really good as far as there not being anything on the end of the thermometer, and we are well over 200. I'm gonna let it cool for about 15 minutes, then take it out of here, let it cool completely, and we'll get it iced. Our carrot cake bread is nice and cool. It has cracked a little more, I think, on the top than when I first took it out. That's okay, we're gonna cover it up. So I'm gonna take this frosting, and I think I'll put most of it on there, and we'll see what it looks like. It's probably gonna take all of it. In fact, let's not waste any time. Let's just put it all on there now. So just spread it out evenly. All right, guys, all iced. Let me get this in the fridge for about 15 minutes. I'm gonna slice it, take a couple photos, and then we'll give it a taste. All right, it is time to taste this gluten-free carrot cake bread. So I'm gonna show you the inside of it. I'm gonna actually try the end piece just because it was the first one cut. So it's all iced. It did sit for 15 minutes in the fridge. It could have gone a little longer because the icing was still really soft. So if it's a slicing issue because of that, it can chill a little bit longer. So there's the inside crumb of it. Really good crumb. The carrots did fine as far as I can tell. I do not see that line in the bottom that they sometimes get when stuff isn't cooked. Looks like it's baked through really nice, so I like that. The cream cheese frosting came together amazing, nice and smooth. Make sure your ingredients are room temperature. That's the key to that. I did use all of it, and I did taste a little bit after. I think the maple is very, very subtle, if at all. So I'm using grade A, I think is what that is. Grade B is a more robust maple flavor. So if you have that, use that. If you wanted a little bit more maple to the top, then if you have maple extract, you might want to try a little bit of that. Here's a single piece. Again, it really baked up well. It was easy to make. It is a quick bread, so let's give it a taste. So I got the end piece, so it's not gonna be quite the same as if I was eating a middle piece, but that's all right. Let's try a little bit without the icing or frosting. Really good taste and texture. Nice, moist taste like a quick bread should be. And I can't tell it's gluten-free. So those are all winners with me. Let's try it with the icing. I think it's really good with the icing. Definitely gives it that carrot cake taste more than a bread. But this as a bread, it's kind of like a cake anyway. I really think it has that good cake taste because a carrot cake is heavier than a white or a yellow or chocolate cake. I think this is good. I think your friends that are not gluten-free are not gonna know the difference if you make this and take it somewhere. So storing this bread, you wanna store it in an airtight container in the refrigerator. Now, refrigeration is because of that cream cheese frosting. I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but I don't love cold breads and cakes in general. So I would definitely take this out a while before you're gonna eat it because I think it's just gonna have better flavor. And that cream cheese and that butter is gonna firm back up, and I just don't think it's gonna be as palatable as it would be if it was room temperature. Just my thoughts, you do what you want, but yes, keep it in an airtight container. Great taste and texture, easy to make, easy ingredients. You can try swapping out for those gluten-free one-to-ones, although this one used Bob's and it hasn't been tested with others according to the blogger. Again, this comes from the Gluten Free Austrian. I will link down below to the recipe. We may need to look at a few more of her recipes. You guys know if I find a good blogger or gluten-free content creator, then I like to do some of their recipes. Loopy Whisk comes to mind. Great directions. Guys, any comments, questions, leave those down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. And I've got a piece of bread to finish, so I hope to see you in the next video.